Yeah, I still remember when I walked 110 miles from the seminary back home. And in the village, there was this turmoil about me, as if I was the first person to ever return, when in fact people had been coming back from Ghana and the Ivory Coast and so forth. But the one reason why I was creating turmoil was one of the things that my father finally told me one day, that I was in possession of a terminal disease. I thought it was something, cancer or something of that sort. Then I found out it was the knowledge of knowing how to read and write. It was shocking to learn that that was a terminal, actually you call it a terminal knowledge. Took me a while to realize that, yeah, indeed, I can't forget how to read and write anymore. Somebody has tried to do that. What I came to understand also was that certain type of knowing deletes the opportunity of accessing other areas of knowledge. As if there's a finite space, a knowledge space within us. I wanted to try as clumsily as possible to address the issue that I would like to call the healing of betrayal. But on second thoughts, I have the feeling that the result of the talk is going to determine the title. And so maybe by the end, when we're all done, the title will be different. The reason for that is that, again, I still remember this statement that my father related to me about the reason why it is important for me not to be in the village. He said something to the effect that hostility always translates behind itself the lurking presence of an unblessed person, which means that a person who is caught in the mania of expressing hatred is a person who is responding to the absence of blessing. And one of the reasons why my grandfather just stayed away from all this modern transformation was because he was worried about the white man's elders. Yeah, because violence from an indigenous point of view comes from the fact that somebody was not blessed. And when you are not blessed, in fact, you're carrying a silent curse within you. Because everybody is entitled to one or the other. And more often than not, when blessing is not explicitly expressed, then curse take the space of blessing. So the problem we're dealing with, at least of anything that I came to understand as far as colonialism was concerned, was that the African continent underwent what it did simply because someone either was cursed or was not blessed. The other thing that I came to understand was that a person who is cursed always goes to the house of a person who is blessed to wage war of that person. This is because the unblessed smells the presence of blessing somewhere, and that smell reminds him of the curse that he is now carrying because someone was not there to bless him. Which is the reason why when we talk about elders having the capacity to bless, we ought to understand that the term cannot be taken lightly. Because when this job is not done, it does not leave just an empty spot in the psyche of the person. It creates a chemical situation because the person has, or each one of us have within ourselves, a space where blessing is supposed to sit there like a car engine alternator, the part that gives the energy, it's the electricity to make the engine run. And when the blessing does not come to be installed in there, what happened is that the entire engine, for lack of proper operation, begins to rot. This is what I like to refer to as a kind of chemical reaction. Because beyond a certain point where blessing is needed, then something else kicks in and it becomes a counter motor. In the village, the reason why initiation happens during the adolescence is simply because at that age kicks in a certain, it's like the bell goes off. It's like an alarm clock that goes off. And at that time, if the elders are not there to put the adolescent through this ritual experience called initiation, incidentally, because in the village it's called remembering. What happened is that the blessing cannot be given properly. You can't bless somebody who's running around wild. You have to put that person through initiation, because that's how the blessing is given by the elders. And so I think there's a chain reaction behind this that makes all of us caught up in the whirlwind caused by the absence of blessing. Because what I call betrayal or hostility, whether it is given or returned, all of these are directly linked to this, to the absence of this major thing that we call blessing. It feels to me that in the absence of blessing too, there is no maturation. You don't grow up. If you're not blessed, you can't grow up. So the implications are almost unbearable if you want to look at it from a large scale. Look at Africa today, for instance. What is called nowadays modern Africa is ruled by people who, just like me, were taken away from their families, brought to the school of the white man, systematically brainwashed, and how to conduct leadership following the white man's model. So those we call bourgeois comprador and the valet of neocolonialism in Africa are those people who were brought up in this particular ways in the high institution at Oxford or the Sorbonne, and who are now back home to actually try to uphold the values of the West right at home. It was strictly a tribal system. The French people found out when they came among the Dagara that there's no hierarchical. The power is not hierarchical. The first thing they ask in the tribe is, where's the chief? And people respond, we don't have chiefs here. We have priests. People who are in service of keeping the relationship between the tribe and the other world sane. But they're not chief, because this is not the kind of job that you will petition for. And so they reported that it was the most primitive of primitive organization, because they still don't know the importance of having a chief. What I'm trying to say here is that there's a certain mindset which, to me, I feel may be coming from a very old curse that has led to a perverse creative road leading to the creation of a certain hierarchy, whether you call it communism or democracy or this or that. As long as it creates power-hungry people of perverse modern tribalism, which in fact carry the name corporation, if you wish. It is still informed by something within that in fact is yearning for some kind of blessing. And as long as that is not there, the creative resources are going to go around the building of external power, a power that intimidates, a power that frightens the other. How that power is expressed in third world and how it is being successful is essentially through the intimidation process as well as the terrorizing. And the worst of it all is the hunger. I lived the first 8 years in this country with just one meal, simply because I could not believe that there is so much food here. I had gotten used to the one meal a day like everybody else in the village. And I could not believe that I could have access to 3. It's only 2.5 years ago when my wife arrived here that she said, this is insane. Let's add another meal. So we decided to have lunch and dinner. But we still can't get it down straight to have the 3 full meal. Because there's something inside that say, well, there's a problem here. And so what happened in the third world is that this dispensation imposes itself by starving other people. If you want to debilitate somebody, take the food away from his desk. This is why in Africa today, if you read literature, modern African literature that literature that is called Afrocentric, there's a lot of food themes in the stories. Everything turned around food. Where is your next meal going to come from? In this kind of context, it's very difficult to stay focused within spirit. And in this kind of context, it's very hard to maintain a link between elders and the young ones, which is the reason why modern African cities are now being flooded by youth running away from initiation, running away from the elders, not because they hate them necessarily, but because there's no food in the village. They go to the city simply because in the city there is an external translation of the presence of food support. What they don't realize is that that food is kept in abundance in certain dinner table and left absent in others, many others. The first time I came into this country, I started out the first day by eating out of trash. That was in New York City, because I got here and the first thing that happened is that everything I had was stolen. And after a long time without food, I started looking into garbage cans until I figured out a way to use a telephone. So what I'm trying to say, whoever confused that is that when we're talking about hostility, we're talking about this particular type of energy that is experienced by the other as antagonizing or antagonistic. We have to go beyond the other person just being the enemy to that person needing healing, to that person being sick. Most of the time in the soul of the unblessed, there is a need and a pull towards negotiating blessing from somebody who already has it. And what happened is that negotiation, it does not come articulated in kind terms. It always comes in the form of a certain form of violence. And I would say that the people who have most been pressured by that are the minorities. Of course, people tend to see blessing as meaning prosperity. You got to disconnect these two things. Blessing does not necessarily mean prosperity with a lot of food, a lot of this and that. Blessing is a state of the soul. Blessing is a place in which the person's psyche sits in comfort. And you cannot deploy blessing by creating glamour or all these external power. In fact, that means the absence of it. My grandfather used to say that beauty brought outside is a lie, and that beauty kept inside is power in the state of growing. It's power that is growing constantly. And the first time one of the elders I took to the city, the first time he saw a multi-story building, he wasn't worried about the building. He was worried about who built it. He said, whoever did this has got a problem. I think that in a culture that has lost the beauty of the state of blessing, that culture began to express itself externally or to boast in one way or another in some intimidating way or another. And for a lot of reasons, I can see the high rises downtown as a signal. That's the ones behind that are desperately trying to send out